And we're back once again. Yes, gosh, we've been on a roll here, D.
Yeah, we have. I was just talking to you just before we started recording. I was telling you, you seem like you're a little pissed.
Oh no, I'm in a great mood today. It's a wonderful day, though. You know what? It's actually cloudy here in Denver, which we only have a few of those a year.
I know.
It's
I'm here right now.
I know that's right. Well, could I open the window and yell across town? Would you hear me?
Probably with your voice. Jesus.
Common feed.
Two middle-aged idiots. So, hey, I see we're both wearing our tiger hats. I got the orange one on today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I don't think I've seen you wear that.
No, I don't wear this one often. I've got a few, I like the orange though, because it goes good with the away jersey with the orange. And then today I'm wearing a shirt that has some orange in it. So I'm like, I'm going orange.
Yeah.
Going
Is
orange.
that NASA?
That's a NASA shirt. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that little retro
old space shuttle.
Okay. Somehow I'm going to try to pull in a segue from that comment with your shirt, that design that you have on there with NASA, to retro, to our special guest that we have today. Do you have any idea who this guy is? Have I told you? Did you even know there was a guy?
I think you mentioned you had a couple good ones coming up, and I've got a couple good ones coming up, and I think this is one of your good ones.
This is one of my good ones. Yeah. I have to say that because I'm sure he's listening right now. No, this guy is amazing. Okay. So the connection there is that this guy has done some incredible art as well as many other things, but he's most well known for his art. And I'm going to let him describe the type of art, but he does a lot of stuff for the connection to NASA here would be to things like for Star Wars and Marvel and DC Comics. And the list goes on and on. This guy does the most incredible work I've ever seen. I'm going to get this wrong, but I would probably put it in I don't know if it's hyperrealism or well, why don't we just bring him on instead of me trying to describe his work?
Exactly.
Monte Moore, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deren. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Yeah, it's kind of fun when you're trying to listen well, this should be good. How are you going to describe this?
Well, how did he do?
He did pretty damn good. Yeah, I definitely would be considered most of my illustrative work a realist illustrator.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's all traditional. I don't do I can do digital art, but I choose not to. Yeah.
Well, I've seen you with even just a pencil in your hand, and especially some of those time lapses that you've done. And it's just so fucking cool to watch this. And would you call some of your work like hyper realism? I don't even know if that's really a term in the art.
But actually it is. So the first illustrator who was ever really that term was coined for was a Japanese illustrator in the 80s whose name was Hajime Sorayama. And he was the king of what we call hyper illustrators. And he even had one of his art books actually even had hyper in the title. And
oh, really?
Yeah. It just meant that next level of realism, literally even above what a camera would translate. Because even when you take a photo of somebody, you don't capture every hair.
Right.
But you can illustrate that way where you're literally indicating detail that we would not even see with the naked eye. So yeah. And my work kind of runs the gamut. I can go hyper realism, and then I can go to something that's a little more loose and almost mildly interpretive, but not abstract.
Right.
So I've done some pieces for Marvel and DC Comics they might have a loose watercolor background, but then the subject itself, I have a piece that is Wonder Woman and Superman and their portraits together. And it's still very painterly, but their portraits are in detail. And then the background is really just kind of almost drippy, splashy paint. So that when you look at it, it's a painting, not like people go, oh, it's a compliment to say it looks like a photograph. You're like, well, I want it to look like art, but I want it to look like realistic.
Are you, when you're doing these, because I see a couple in the background, I'm not sure if those are yours in your background. I see
They
one of
are.
Baby Yoda or whatever his name is. I don't know the Baby Yoda's name.
So there's the Mandalorian right there
Mandalorian,
with
okay.
Grogu. And then, yep, there's Grogu. And
So,
those are 2 licensed pieces. And I've done 16, 18, 19 paintings for what they call the Mandalorian collection. And I am what they call the exclusive artist for that, meaning no other artist was hired to do that officially
wow.
licensed fine art series. And I've even got to go to both Disney World, Disneyland, and Star Wars celebrations as a guest artist to sign and sketch for the fans.
Now, would that be through Lucasfilms then that you're being
It's in
hired?
conjunction. So the fine art licensee is a parent, larger licensing company called Art Brand Studios, and that's who I work with. And then they would work in conjunction. These pieces over here were released through Thomas Kincaid Studios, really as kind of a marketing arm because they were established in creating the prints, getting them into galleries and things. So you get a wider reach faster. And then, so when I would be on a call where we were discussing my sketches on a setup just like this, like a split screen, and then I would have already provided thumbnail drawings of maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 concepts for every single episode. What are the key elements in that episode that are a snapshot? And I like this one here with where they're in the cockpit called 2 for the Road. It's really the first time that the Mandalorian kind of does like what I call a dad move, right? Before Grogu was like, hey, get away from me, kid, you bother me. Kind of like, don't touch my stuff, right? But at the very end of that episode, which is actually involves like breaking some people out of prison and there's all this action stuff. But right before it faded to black, there's this little episode and he just takes this little gear shift knob and he hands it back to Grogu and then it goes to black. And it was such a touching moment. I was like, oh, that's going to resonate with fans. Because I
Right.
look at it from a fan standpoint. I'm
I can tell.
I'm a lifelong super Star Wars fan. I used to have a life-size Han Solo in carbonite that was in that corner, but it's actually now
Wow.
out in my other studio in my garage.
So to
Wow.
finish my question, so I see those as 2 examples of your work.
Mhm.
Now, are you doing, obviously you said you start with a sketch, with the little thumbnail thing that you show to these, but is this done on a computer or are you doing, so this is all with like paints
Mhm.
and because that is incredible. You are an amazing artist.
Oh, thank you.
My,
So if people wanted to see more of that particular stuff,
yes,
they would go
yes.
to galaxyartguild.com, which is my one of about 4 different websites I have. So that one is specifically just Star Wars and Mandalorian art because Lucasfilm literally doesn't want that shown and selling next to, say, my pinup art or
Right.
comics and G.I. Joe and lots of other properties. So that one has kind of its own category. And then I have a separate website that is just for Western and wildlife art. And that's for the art that I put to galleries. There's a little painting right there of
Oh,
a
yeah.
Native American who's a brave who's unearthing an old conquistador's helmet.
Oh,
And so he's found it in the sand and he's bringing it up like at the time when the conquistadors had left North America and it was left behind. They also left behind the horse. And that's why we have the domesticated horse that was left behind by the Spanish.
now another question just to play off that one. So when you do this stuff for like Star Wars,
Mhm.
for instance, do they get a cut of it because it is their,
Sure.
it
Yep.
is their property that you're
For sure.
actually painting?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so what, you work out in advance, you say, okay, I'll do this. You guys get 60, I get 40, but you're doing all the artwork. It's like, they're not doing
I mean,
anything.
I'm not allowed to go into too much detail, but it's more of I'm really just the hired hand. It's
Okay.
their property.
Gotcha.
Right. It's like a work for hire and I work for them and I'm creating something that even though I don't have a licensing deal with them, they don't most the time these days, there are fewer licensing opportunities. But I get to buy these pieces at wholesale like a gallery would, and I
Right.
can sell them at my shows. So it gives me a great offering that nobody else has. If they say, oh, I want some, really some good Star Wars art, you can go buy some fan art that anybody at a convention might have. But this is officially licensed with a certificate on the back and, signed off on by Lucasfilm. Now, I actually do have some Star Wars paintings that I had proposed to them that are classic characters: Luke, Obi-Wan, Vader, Han, Leia, Chewie. And so those actually is a separate series that are also on that website. And actually, I do get a licensing from that. And you can see right there, halfway up there on the wall, is one of the Mandalorian puzzles. So if they were to license some of my art and put it on a puzzle,
Oh, neat.
I might get a small piece of that if it was the Luke Obi-Wan, but 5-10 cents, for per one that's sold around the world.
That's amazing. And now a word from our sponsor. And back to the show. Okay, so the categories you would say, you mentioned pinup, you mentioned Western.
Mm-hmm.
What are all the categories that you would sort of, or themes, or I don't know how you would define genre? What are all the genres that you do?
It's a long list, but I'm weird because I am this kind of jack of all trades, and most people specialize, right? If you were in the NFL, you're like, I'm a running back, not a quarterback, right?
Right.
But for some reason, I get bored with doing one thing too long. And I think when Deren and I first met and we started doing some writing, I was dipping my toe into the filmmaking world, and I have done some feature films and writing, which I totally love. But for about 10 years, actually, a lot of my money making was coming from painting custom motorcycles and cars. Because of the airbrush and hand painting skills I had, I very quickly got hired by a lot of the TV guys, right? Those kinds of people who were the Orange County Choppers and things like that. So from I would say 04 to maybe 2016, 17, 18, the comic book area was more in a slump, and that's where I got my start in the 90s. And so I was like, wow, there's good money in painting vehicles. And then I kind of got tired of that, and it had its own challenges, and you got to travel around the country and go to car shows and stuff, and a lot more outdoor events. But then I started getting more back into comics and writing. So I've self-published, I think 9 graphic novels now that I've written, and each of these graphic novels is between 48 and 100 pages. So I would take a 100-page screenplay. So one of the ones Deren would know about was called The Book of Mark. And I actually hired an interior artist because I don't do interior comic book art. I do covers, and I can art direct it, I can write it, but I don't want to spend my time is better served doing these projects. And then I take that money that I make and I give it to other artists for them to illustrate my graphic novels. And then I would put them on Kickstarter and then go publish those. Now I have a written and published graphic novel and screenplay, and it's basically storyboarded. So I could then go to my end goal for all of my publishing of those graphic novels is so that I can go to a production company and say, here's a body of work. It's illustrated, it's published, it's its own IP, it's alive in the world. Which of these would make a great, indie type film or a TV series? And so some of them have been written as pilots and things like that. But then also in 2018, when I was starting to phase out of vehicle painting, I decided to kind of go back to my roots a little bit. And I grew up on a 38,000 acre working cattle ranch in Idaho. And so my life growing up as a kid was building fence and riding horses and doing cowboy stuff. And, I hated all of it. It's sun up to sundown, backbreaking, outdoor, rain, shine, cranky animals. It's not all glorious like Yellowstone, but you learn hard work. You learn a hell of a work ethic. But on our ranch, my dad had built a hunting and fishing lodge that was fully decorated with so much fantastic mountain man and Western art from Remington and Russell and Norman Rockwell and, the greats of some of that genre. And so I think that inspiration was, well, now I'm a lot better artist. right? I've got 20, 25 years under my belt. Maybe I should try to see how good I could be at horses and cowboys and Native American and, eagles and, all this kind of stuff. And so I had taken some workshops when I was younger. I take a lot of art workshops from other artists. That's one of the reasons how I get better, because I'm studying with the very best people in the industry, who are people who are doing museum quality work, not just galleries or, local shows.
Put a
And
happy little tree there with some Van Dyke.
right.
Brown.
Yeah. Little Bob Ross,
Bob Ross.
right?
It's not to interrupt you, but I find that amazing because I've got no artistic ability outside of like performance art. And music and stuff, but I guess
Right.
that would be performance. But I can't draw, and like both of you guys can. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Deren's work, but Deren's a pretty good artist as well.
It's nothing like Monte's.
No, but it's not stick figures, I
No.
mean,
And now a word from our sponsor. And back to the show. But back to your genres, which do you think is your largest fan base that you have based off of, how people respond to your work? Do you think it's the Western? Do you think it's Star Wars? Because Star Wars, I just think like
It is
huge audience.
The pop culture is a much longer reach. So when I started my career in 1993, I graduated from art school at Colorado State University, and I went to work for the family business, which was natural and organic meats. We had a packing plant here in town, and my dad was kind of a pioneer in that. So I had a nice regular job, entry level, doing graphic design. And then I could kind of freelance on the side. And that's how I kind of built that up. But I was never an overnight success. You get one or two little jobs a year. So I've had this long, slow 32-year rise where I was out of school a good 10, 15 years before I got my first licensed Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And then that helps with other doors because you can say, oh, I've done this. And people might think, well, okay, you're good enough now for us. And one of my So one of my longest standing clients is a publisher in Scottsdale, who's they're the sort of number one outlaw indie publisher, right? You have the big two, you have Marvel and DC. And so this company is called Coffin Comics, and they produce their flagship character is a provocative, beautiful, bad girl called Lady Death. And I've done probably 100 paintings for Lady Death over the years. And I have a rejection letter from them, just like I have a rejection letter from DC Comics and Marvel and Lucasfilm.
Right.
And I have those in a box, in a book. And when the time was right, and I reached out to Brian Polito, who's the publisher, and said, hey, I'd really love to work with you. And here's some of the new work, here's where I am now, because early in my career, I wasn't ready yet. And so you do look back on that as now I consider myself a journeyman artist, right? You're in the trenches. I hate that term master. People are like, oh my God, you're a master art. And you're like, no, anybody who's a douchebag would call themselves a master artist. That's rarefied.
Deren calls
art.
himself a masturbator.
Well, he's good at fishing. You got to get the bait
efficient.
on the hook.
Oh my God. It was just a matter of time before Tom went there.
Right?
Of course I have to, man. It's my sophomoric sense of humor at full mast.
Right.
Anywho,
it's just like music, right? Like you might look and say, I could ask you who the best 5 guitarists in the world are, right? And would you say, Steve Vai or John Petrucci or
No, it'd be Hendrix would be it.
Usually
Clapton
Hendrix
would
is
be
at
in
number
there.
1, right? On a lot of the things. And those opinions vary. But from a non-educated view from my fans, they might say, oh, well, you're at the top of your game. And my response is, I'm about half as good as I hope I one day will be.
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about my art. Because I see art that other people do and I go, man, I wish I was that good.
yeah.
And that's what drives me.
But it also is where the workshops probably come in, because you said like
huge.
Yeah, you'll see someone and you're like, well, how do you do that? And then you learn how to do that. Oh, who's
Okay,
that?
this is not mine. This is
Describe to the audience what we're seeing here.
Yeah, what are we
okay.
seeing?
So this is a fine art bronze by, in my opinion, one of America's finest artists. His name's John Coleman out of Prescott, Arizona. Prescott, as they like to say. Prescott. And this is a Hopi woman, and this would have been made out of traditional, like a soft clay. And this is about all I could afford of John Coleman's. So, and his editions are very small. They're the maximum amount he'll ever cast of something is 35, 36.
Oh,
And so, a piece like this would be, could be anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000, depending on where it's sold out, where it's being sold. But if you wanted a monumental, which is life size, right? Sitting bull on a horse with a war spear
in your front yard,
or in front of your museum or your business, that
Right.
might cost you $250,000 to $500,000.
wow.
Right.
Wow.
Now, this guy also paints at a museum quality level, and he didn't even start his art career till he was 46. And the most expensive workshop I ever took was last year from him at the Broadmoor down in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And I knew it was a great opportunity. It was in my backyard. I could get down there quickly, and it was worth it. Like, oh my God, did that say John Coleman was teaching a workshop? Like, this guy's next level. And he's old.
Right.
He's a cowboy guy. Didn't even start painting till like 10 years ago. Self-taught, had a successful real estate career and gave up on art. And then when he was like, you know what? I'm good. I sold my businesses. He was retired. He was, I'm going to take back up art because he had a penchant for it. So I think that he is one of those people who has true natural talent. And I get in arguments with people like this all the time because I say I'm not a talented person. What I have is what my friends lovingly call the infinity drive. So my drive to be better at my own art is what makes me learn and study and work harder and stay up late and draw and just always push myself. And it's never run out. I don't ever hit writer's block and say I can't draw or paint and all my stuff sucks. I don't have that problem, but I also don't have a lot of natural ability because even years later, I'll draw really bad hands, really an awful foot. And you're like, I'm drawing like I'm 14 again. And I think people who are truly talented, who have that special something, I think the bottom of their ability is a lot higher than the rest of ours.
Now it makes sense why all of your characters have their hands in their pocket and
Right.
And they're all wearing shoes.
No, and there's a lot of my early drawings, actually. I don't think I have one on the wall. Well, there's one over there. And, you would tuck away the hands.
Just kidding, but yeah.
No, it's true. And even my mom, when I was a little kid and I was trying to draw like Dungeons and Dragons characters, they were all men. They all had helmets on because I was avoiding faces and, big gauntlets, hiding the fingers. And my mom brought me these, she's an artist, a hobby artist, and she didn't do it too much as a career thing, but she was in some galleries and she had lots of art books and it was figure drawing. And so she brought me, I said, Mom, I want to learn to draw people better, right? It's the hardest thing in the world to draw. And I'm only like 14. And so she brings me this stack of like 6 or 8 human anatomy books that are for artists. And she's like, study these, do not take them to school, right? It's all nudes, inside.
So Playboy for now. Okay,
right. It's just tasteful, but still.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So I do remember that. And I got things like one year for my birthday, I got a desk for my drawing chair, and another year it was a new desk, so it was always art related. And so at 16, I remember I came home from from high school, and I said, Mom, Dad, I have an announcement. And they were like, kind of formal, like, really?
Right.
What are you going to tell us? They were worried. And I said, right. I said, I think I want to be an artist. Right. Exactly. And, so
And
My
when you said
mom
you're
did.
going to be an artist, they were like, "Oh, that's the worst thing I could have imagined."
That's worse than
Well, the
anything.
fortunate, so my mom is, was always really creative and she did jewelry, she did painting. She went back to school, got almost enough credits for an entire another degree in graphic design just to
Wow.
help my dad when he started the beef company. So
Yeah.
she had plenty of art on her side, and she had a full studio, and I had access to lots of materials, including airbrush. But she did like the banners in the church, and she did stained glass windows, right? So that's probably where I get it from. Like, don't just
Yeah.
do one thing. But I didn't find out till years later that in one of my dad's memoir things, he actually said, I was disappointed when my son said he was going to become an artist, because my dad's pretty egotistical, and he wanted all of his sons, because there's 4 of us, to all be cowboys. And being an artist is like the opposite of a cowboy,
Right.
right? Because growing up in that time too, you're like, artists, oh yeah,
Yeah.
kind of sit home and behind the table and watch anime or something. But all 3 of my other brothers all went into like ag business and that kind of thing. So I am 100% the black sheep of the family.
There
But
you go.
when I started doing cowboys and drawing less half naked women
He
on
loved that, didn't he?
riding dragons, he was like, "Oh my God, you're drawing
Yeah.
cowboys!"
Right.
And I was much more advanced in my career then, so the work was a lot better.
Yeah.
So when I go do my Western shows now, that is Western and wildlife, it's a lot of my very best work because it's all only 7 or 8 years old. There's nothing you're pulling out from the Wayback Machine that was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't show that one.
So would you do something as an example for your father? Let's just say, if you were
Mhm.
drawing something for him, could you make him like a John Wayne character on a horse or something like
He
that?
already looks like it. I have drawn
But I
his
mean,
portrait several times.
so you could do his face and make it look like him.
Oh, dead on. Most of the reason why I get work from Star Wars and stuff like that is I kind of specialize in portraiture. And
Okay.
I have this new thing that I'm doing that I don't know any other artist that's doing. And it's why I kind of have the market cornered for the last
Right.
5-6 years. So I have, and I don't have one to show, but if somebody were to go to theartofmontemore.com, it'll show you a picture of my dad on top of a stagecoach crossing the river at night and the horses and everything splashing. And you can see it says Wells Fargo on the stagecoach.
Wow.
And one time I was at Cowboy Christmas in Las Vegas, which has become my biggest show of the year. It's 10 days, part of the National Finals Rodeo. And I have these big 6-foot long prints in these crazy Western frames that are all made out of barnwood and horse harness and horseshoes and gun wrap.
Horse shit. Everything's in
Everything.
there.
Oh, I don't take the horse shit off. It's actually still on there.
Yes.
So I was talking to this gentleman and I said, that's my dad up on the stagecoach. And he looked at me and he said, that's pretty cool that that's your dad, but can you make it my dad? And I looked at him and I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So by combining digital, I told you I can do it. I just choose not to do a lot of it. So what I do is I draw a separate portrait, provide it on them. And it could even be somebody who's passed away, right? A grandfather, father. I have done a 4 generations piece on a cattle drive, and none of them are in the same state or in the same universe, because the grandfather photo was him from the 50s. And I redraw their portraits and I Photoshop them into the art. And then up on the ranch sign or on the side of the stagecoach, I put their family name, and I can even put their dogs on the cattle drive. I can put their kids. I can fully change it, but then I don't have to redraw all the cattle and all the horses.
Right.
And
Love
so this last year, I had 9 of those that I did for ranching families, and they could choose between Black Angus, running horses, or Longhorns coming out of the gate, because I can do a separate drawing. And then in Photoshop, I can move those animals in and out. And it's become this thing that I'm doing that nobody else is doing, because most artists are either all digital or they're all traditional, and they certainly aren't building their own frames. And so I'm doing all of this and offering it as a package, and it's not cheap. You're talking about a $7,000 to $8,000 investment for this piece that when it's finished is 7 feet long.
Wow.
And it's going to be shipped to you or it's going to be delivered in person. So last month I delivered 3 within Colorado in my truck and trailer.
Right. So, Monte, I want to talk more about the business side of things because we talk about that often on here. But before we do, can you talk about some of the pinup genre and the other work that you do? Because I've seen you do a lot of the pinup work, and it's always reminded me of like the Vargas girls.
Hmm.
Is that right? Is
Yeah,
that the right?
Vargas, Alberto Vargas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for people that may not know, Vargas, correct me if I'm wrong, but he did like some like pinup artwork that was in Playboy, like in the early days. Was
And
that right?
Esquire. Yeah. So there was three big guys back in the day, and they were the kings of pinup, right? And you're talking 1940s, World War II war era. And so the three big guys are Vargas, Alberto Vargas, Petty, and if I move my camera just a little bit, see that one right there above the door?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a Petty that's up there. And then the other sort of master of pinup, his name was Gil Elvgren. And Gil Elvgren's work wasn't as airbrushy looking. He actually did more oil painting. And he was kind of the king of what we call good girl art, right? And that's where, the woman is kind of surprised and real coquettish, and, her panties or stockings are caught on a nail, or, the dog's pulling it down, kind of like the old
Right.
Coppertone ad.
Yeah.
And so that was one of my earliest influences, even when I was in high school. When I got into college, started doing my first pinup art. And when I went to my first Comic-Con in San Diego in 1993, that was the work that started getting me the most notice, because I was doing very realistic, very rendered female figures. And so all of my first published, and 99.9% of every published cover that I've done is usually a female figure. So I didn't set out to be a pinup artist. And then when I realized 5, 10 years into it, wow, you've been pigeonholed. You are
Right.
a pinup artist, because
Yeah.
I'd already had 4 or 5 books published of just pinup art. And to this date, there's like 10 books published of my pinup art. So there's a body of work there that comes from that influence. And one of the projects that Deren helped me with a number of years ago was a sizzle reel for an idea that I had on a reality TV show that would have followed me going to car shows and painting motorcycles for, say, a charity event. And one of the projects that Deren got to see was a 1942 Texas A6, which is called a SNJ, a Texan. It was a Navy fighter trainer plane.
We flew that, remember?
Yes.
We went up in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Did you get to go up too?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Yes.
Oh, God.
And so so that plane has a same pinup girl on each side, and the owner of the plane decided to call it Major Distraction. And the plane
That's
is canary yellow. And that's the way they
Yeah.
always were, historically speaking, until they were probably put into service as a warplane. At the end of the war, they put guns on them. And I've had to paint that plane 3 times now.
Wow.
Because of damage that has occurred. And unfortunately, I found out this last year, he had a little power surge or whatever, and he had to emergency land again. And he called me up and he said, I know you're probably going to say no, but would you fix this and paint it again? And I was like, I'm kind of retired from that part of the business. But for you, yes, I will fix it and repair it, because I'm the only one who can. Because
that
it's
was beautiful
the
work.
painting, the pinup girl is like 4 feet, and it's on a big curved, nose cone. That's this, it looks like a 4-foot donut. Okay.
I'm going to describe to the audience what we're seeing here.
So this is a piece called Thunder Road. This drawing probably has 100 hours into it. And you can see it's a stagecoach scene with 6 horses running at high speed, and they're being chased by some desperados. And this is in a nice, unique kind of Western frame. Sorry for the glare. You can see more on the website. So this has been shown in a number of galleries. Right now it's offered at the Broadmoor galleries.com at their website. And, a drawing like this, retail price is in that $7,000 to $9,500 kind of range. And I have 3 world titles in drawing.
Wow.
And two of those competitions were fantasy art, and then one was fourth in the world for Western drawing 1 year for a online competition that was international.
Yeah, and then for our listening audience, that drawing that you just showed too, it was the frame was also pretty spectacular. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about your work too, is that you seem to put a lot of thought in how it's displayed. So it's not just the art itself, but what it goes on, what sort of material it's on, what how it's framed up. Maybe sometimes it's not framed. Maybe sometimes I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes you know, leaving the canvas unframed so you can see sort of the genesis of the artist's work.
So my neighbors next door, they bought a piece for me that was probably about a 5-foot painting, maybe 40 by 60 of Ava Gardner. And it was a licensed piece, meaning I paid like a licensing fee. And I never built a frame for it because one whole side of the painting is the negative shape of the white. And I wanted that so that I knew it would probably go on a white wall. It basically, that side of the painting just kind of blends off. And then the other side is all of her. And so you really get the silhouette of the shape because there is no left side to her dress. You see her top, part of her arm, and this beautiful black and white face. And the only color accents on it are just her shirt top, and it's in a color shift paint that, depending on how you move and view it, right, it changes color. It's a chameleon paint,
right?
And then like her pearl necklace, I glued pearls, like her string of pearls is 3D. So I do a lot of things just kind of outside of the box. Like I said, that one didn't deserve a frame, and then there's others where the frame is so over the top that it just makes it so much more. Like I have a piece that will be shown here at a gallery called the Comic Ink Gallery in November. And it's a cover painting for Terminator versus Transformers #1. And so it has the Terminator hanging off of the old school truck Optimus Prime, but his first version, which was like a Peterbilt cab that was black, or that was red and white. But then the frame I built for it was black diamond plate with truck cab lights across the top, huge silver lugs going down the side, 2 big grab bars on either side of the art, like you're going into the cab. And then on the bottom, 2 headlights with a little grill that we made for it. And then it plugs in and all the lights work and light up. So it's this cool truck cab Optimus Prime themed frame.
That's amazing.
That's cool.
By the way, I got to say, that's the first time I've heard anybody reference a pearl necklace or Peterbilt without Tom inserting a joke.
Inserting a joke.
I can still go there.
Monte, before we run out of time, I want to have you just tap into the business side of things, because you are so business savvy, and also even past the business side, there's so much more to talk about because you're an incredible writer too. We've written some treatments together, and and I've had such a blast in that creative side of writing, that you're just so fucking talented at all of that stuff. You tell stories visually, you tell stories through written word. But again, the business side of things, there's a lot of artists, a lot of screenwriters, a lot of producers, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of whatever they are, that just have no business sense, whatever, and whatsoever. And you know how to make things work. So can you dive into that?
I think a lot of time we creatives in general, we kind of suck at organization. Like, we're usually not type A people. Right. Yeah. Like my better half is the capital A, type A, almost OCD. And I am like type Z, right? I'm a whirling dervish tornado of an art. I'm an art NATO. And
I like that.
Yeah. Even my little YouTube channel is called Art Attack. Right. Because I just I'm like the 8-armed octopus. But I didn't take a lot of business classes in college. So I think it probably just comes from, having the family business that I was a part of for about 10 years outside of college was primarily beef marketing company. And so I was doing the ads and the layout and the design for that. So I don't know if that was just a byproduct of the organization of just being around. Like we had 300 employees at one time. It was a pretty big operation before we closed it in '08. But, or one of the things, like I might not have been super talented with art, but my natural knack is actually maybe more like marketing.
Yeah.
Right now, just like anybody else, I've had as many or more failures, but most of the time you don't hear about that, right? Like you see, oh, well, Lucasfilm, you're at the top of your game. But there's things like I've still never done a cover for Marvel. I've done licensed art for Marvel and DC, and there's lots of different ways you can work for people. But one of the itches that I've never been able to scratch is you have to have your name on this like pseudo unicorn magic list for either of these companies. And when the art directors come and go, they may not like you anymore. They may, prefer to use this guy over here. But I, to this date, still never done a cover for Marvel or DC. But then you also look at it as an artist and go, why does that bother you? Look at all the other things that you're done and doing. And are you already beyond that anyway? Right? Because now I'm trying to get into the finest galleries in the country, right? The Plainsman, the Broadmoor, Jackson Hole, places like that, where the money that people are willing to pay for really good fine art that's typically Western and wildlife is far beyond pop culture. Now, there's only a couple of pop culture high end, right? So you probably know the name Frank Frazetta. And Frank Frazetta was the godfather. He was the first guy. They didn't even call it fantasy art then. They called it swords and sorcery, right? Now, a painting from him, now he died 10, 12 years ago, is now 4 to 7 million. And that's also the kind of money that somebody would pay for a Remington or a Russell, right? Early cowboy art, stuff like that. But outside of Frank Frazetta, a really good illustrator still doesn't get 20 grand, 40 grand for their best paintings. But if you were to look at an artist like Dustin Van Wetchel for here in Colorado, or Greg Beecham, who's a artist who would sell up in Jackson Hole, they can get 40 grand for an amazing painting of wolves crossing a snowy, river or something like that. And they're that next level fine artist, and the appreciation and the amount of dollars that are being spent there seem to be on average far greater than the pop culture industry.
Right. But one of the things that I see with you, because, I follow you on, your different social media channels.
I'm pretty good with social media.
Yeah, I know that's the thing is that marketing stuff, a lot of artists are really shy or reluctant, and they feel like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. They're introverted, but also, I don't know, it seems like they feel like as an artist, I shouldn't be doing this because maybe
trying to sell myself, kind of like that.
I shouldn't sell myself. I shouldn't exploit myself. But to the contrary, you should. Yeah. You should get out your artwork because you're trying to say something, and there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, there's nothing but good about that. So what I see,
it's hard. It's hard for introverts to be able to sell themselves, right? Because, and there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. I'm perfectly confident in my art, but you never want to put somebody down, right? And that's when somebody's arrogant, when they say, well, I'm better than you are. But you have to constantly market yourself. Now, the benefit to young artists today is they have this. They have social media, they have technology. And I was mailing out photocopies of my art to Marvel for my earliest rejections. Now I can get rejected all day long on, via email when they ignore you. And they're still ignoring me. Don't get me wrong. But you have to have really thick skin. Yeah. And I will tell you that my very best client that has ever come from my career, which is right over here, the Mandalorian stuff, has made me more money than any other project I've ever done, and is certainly the apex of my career. And that was a cold solicitation to them. That company had a booth at San Diego Comic-Con, and I had a gentleman working for me who was helping with the studio so that I'd spend more time doing art. And he brought back this card. And he said, hey, these guys are doing licensed Star Wars in DC. You should see who they are. And I was like, I never heard of them. So I get back home, check it out. And it takes me from that website to the Thomas Kincaid site, or the Art of Entertainment. They have a separate website for their Star Wars. And I can remember it was just a form letter. You have to fill out the, who are you? Here's your email. What do you want? And I was sitting here looking at the screen going, should I even bother to fill this is so far above me. They're not going to want what I'm doing. And I did send the solicitation. And a day later, I got an email from the assistant saying, my boss, head of VP of marketing, would like to meet with you, and you would need to sign an NDA to have a conversation. And I was like, whoa, wow. Okay. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to do more of the Marvel DC because I'd already done a lot of Star Wars, but timing worked out extremely well for the Mandalorian hit, maybe 6-8 months later. And I was actually doing a test piece for them that was Mickey and Minnie in a rowboat. Not my wheelhouse. Now I can step outside of my wheelhouse, and it was a beautiful painting. I don't think it was ever published, but it was a test piece. And then when the Mandalorian hit, I said, this just broke the internet. You need to put somebody on this. And they said, when do you want to start? And I was like, me? No, I've done Star Wars. And they're like, no, you're the Star Wars guy. Like, you know more about Star Wars than any of us. And I'm like, well, that's true.
You have the Force.
I do. And so it started out as like a 1 to 3 painting thing that has led to, over 20 plus. And NASCAR, I recently did 2 paintings for Yellowstone. So then I could combine my love of pop culture, cowboys and ranching, and they went out and got a Yellowstone license. And so it's very full circle. And so you do have to market yourself. All that to say, it's up to you to market yourself, and you can't rely on somebody else. You certainly can't rely on, my mother always told me I was the best artist in the whole family, the whole world. You're like,
well, our listeners who aren't watching the video portion, well, why don't you give out your websites one more time? Because I think, what I'm seeing in the background and what you've held up so far, as soon as we get done recording this, I'm going to go look at more of your art.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 4 websites.
And we'll add these links to the bio.
Yeah. So you can see here by my hat, Maverick Art Studio. So if you were to go to Maverick Arts, or even shorter, Mav Arts.
Okay, yes. So Mav Arts.
So Mav Arts, yep. And then Western and Wildlife is theartofmontemoore.com, spelled MONTEMOORE.com. And there you'll see Western, wildlife, pet commissions, cowboy art, bronzes, that kind of thing. Right. As I dabble in that. And then my Star Wars website, which is standalone, is called Galaxy Art Guild. And that's where people can see Star Wars and The Mandalorian. And then the last one, which ties in a little bit to what Deren touched on, and I'm certainly willing to come back another time if you guys want to talk more about writing and integrating with art, is called montemoore.com. And montemoore.com is my film website. And I still keep a hand in that. I do solicit out some of my screenplays on Stage 32, which is a marketing website for screenwriters and producers and songwriters, etc. And so that shows on montemoore.com. It has a little bit of the info of some of the stories I've done, and then just a little bit of my background, an IMDb link, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then the very other link that's kind of a catch-all is a link tree. And it would be the link tree. It has a weird abbreviation, but it's linktree dot whatever, TRE. And then it's /Studio Scarab, because I guess somebody else had the other one.
Okay.
But that one has here's Monty's Amazon, here's his eBay page, here's Instagram, here's Twitter. And on Instagram, I'm just Mav Arts, same as the website.
Well, I'm adding you on Instagram, and I got a whole list here of websites to check. Man, this has been so cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we've turned your day around.
Yeah, my mood has been elevated by Monte Moore. I mean, does it get any better than that?
Well, you gotta have more of more. That's
more.
It.
That's
more
more. So my hashtag is expect more, and I put that in a lot of my posts. But I will say, when I was up at CSU, one of the greatest compliments I ever got was from a mentor and teacher who I did the internship with, and it was for creative and public publications, and you did the alumni newsletter and things on campus.
Sure.
And the graphic design students could have get an internship. And he said, one of the things that I've noticed by having you around with the other students is because you push yourself so hard that you're a catalyst. And what I'm seeing is the 6 or other 8 students that are here are all now doing their best work because they're like, oh crap, Monte's here. Right. And I was still drawing and painting where they were doing cutouts and using magazines for layouts because I was trying to take it to the next level. And that was just the way I did it. So I thought it was very cool that one of the greatest compliments I ever got was, you're a catalyst to make other people try to do their best.
That is incredible.
That is.
So,
That really is.
Right. I've never gotten that kind of compliment. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah, Deren tells me you make the
away.
show work. Deren says you make the show worse, Tom.
Right.
You know, I'm a big fan of Deren. You, I'm not so sure about. I don't know you as well, but you know, I have a lot of respect for Deren, and I wouldn't
he's an
work
amazing
alongside somebody who is, you know, too schlubby.
Yeah, exactly.
Quickly before we leave, I just want to, you know, reflect on some of the just briefly, some of the work that Monte and I did together. In particular, one of my favorites was this treatment that we worked on together. We were sort of, I guess, commissioned by the, I think it was the state of Colorado. They were looking for a couple of like seasoned producers and writers, and since they couldn't find any, we were available. And it was kind
of a call for entry contest kind of thing.
Well, they selected, I think, 2 or 3 people, so we were just up against a couple of people to write this treatment. And we had, I think, just like a 1-week period or 10 days max.
Because you came over and we worked on it over here for the concept for our training.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it was like over the Christmas break or something too.
Yep.
And the only, I can't say too much about it. I think we're still under an NDA, but I do remember like there's this Moses character that was in it.
Yeah.
And it
was
had
a historical kind of reference to a figure.
Yeah. And it was tied to the Durango Silverton Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all. We had no other instructions about it, but it had to include this Moses character.
Moses and a train.
Well,
go for it,
It
guys.
was a very different Moses. So
it was a Native American character from the area that was historical.
Yeah, absolutely. So we came up with a really cool story, and it had a very Stand By Me sort of feel. And I always wanted to make that movie, and it's actually
kids, such a Goonies influence.
Yeah,
Treasure Hunter.
Such a great story. And unfortunately, I think they just couldn't get the funding together to actually make it. But ultimately, I think that there was an option on it. I can't remember, but it was such a great thing. And we won like the New York
Park something
screenplay, I don't know, something, but we won like best treatment.
It did. It won best treatment at a New York film festival that you had submitted to. I'm like, well, it's a nice little feather in the cap.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But that was so cool. And eventually I'd love to finish that and maybe turn it into something else.
I can do the movie trailer.
There you go. Right.
I should probably introduce both of you guys. Did you ever meet Ace Underhill? Friend of mine who I do a lot of filmmaking with. He's actually just moved his whole studio setup from LA. A lot of people are leaving LA, and he's moved it to Phoenix. And he has somewhere between 10 and 12 features lined up, as well as he's been doing commercials. So he has one of the largest LED walls, you know, the the Mandalorian, and he's building out, and he wants to build an entire filmmaking campus in Phoenix. That's a standalone sound stages, little hotel where production crew and staff and everybody can be on site. So that's his end goal. But he's really doing great things down there, and that's who I've done my award-winning short with. It was Star Wars. It's on YouTube, called TK421. Why aren't you at your post?
Oh my God.
Was a Star Wars fan film finalist.
Yeah.
And then we also did a feature film together as well.
That's awesome. We should go out there and meet him sometime, just to have some reason to hang too.
Yes.
Not like we need a reason, but it's always good to create one. We did that with skiing one time. It's like, hey, let's write and ski.
Well, and we still have that place up there. Plus, we have a place in Scottsdale. So if you want to get down there,
let's do it.
Down there. Let's do
anytime,
it
buddy.
Yeah, let's do it this
winter. I love it. It's a date.
Sweet.
Monte, Thank you so much for being our guest. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure.
Hope you are willing to come back on the show again.
Absolutely.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, great. Thanks, Monty. Take care. What'd you think?
That guy has got more talent in his little pinky than I've got in my whole body. My God. And the thing I liked about him is that he says, I'm okay, but I put in the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like I learned my craft. And anytime he wants to learn something new, he takes a workshop from some artist that he admires. And obviously he's got more talent than he's giving himself credit for because, you know, you've seen his stuff. It's just incredible. Absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, in addition to just being incredibly entertaining, there's so many lessons to be had, you know, from that discussion. One, of course, you know, about what you were just talking about with, you know, putting in those hours and working hard, and whether you have this innate ability or not, you still have to hone your craft. You still have to develop it. You still have to put in the hours to gain that expertise, to go beyond that, to, you know, just improve.
And to be called a catalyst, I mean, that is just like for the whole department. I mean, that's.
Yeah. And then again, as an artist, you know, too many of us, I'll put myself in there too, that we have this reluctance to say, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, it sounds boisterous. It sounds like I'm bragging on something.
Market the hell out of yourself, man.
Yeah. And to his point, you don't want to be arrogant, but you do want to be confident and put your stuff out there for let people see it. You know, I mean, why are you doing something if people don't have an opportunity to see it?
So let's market the hell out of this podcast.
Nah, I don't want to.
Yeah, just kind of boring. Yeah, forget it. We don't want to come off as being arrogant.
Exactly. All right, buddy.
All right, Deren. We'll talk to you real soon, bud.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to the next show. Later,
dude.
Hum and deep.
Two middle-aged idiots.
This podcast is produced by 224 Media with voice and audio support by Fry on the Fly Productions.